Hi, and welcome to Meta-Conscious Leaders with me, Greg Seward, and my guest today, who I'm delighted to say is none other than Penny Power, author, international speaker, and entrepreneur extraordinaire. I first met Penny more than 20 years ago when she was running Academy, an online business community that she launched in 1998, 4 years before LinkedIn. Trailblazing this concept with her husband, Thomas Power, the two of them grew the network into a global community that supported hundreds of thousands of small businesses worldwide. In 2011, due to the banking crisis and the actions of one bank in particular, Academy was sold, and Penny's lessons in business and life took on a personal journey of rebuilding. Her book, Business is Personal, is a statement that in life, as a business person, being the leader of your own self is the greatest lesson. Your business is personal as it is yours. Penny has called herself an accidental entrepreneur for years and believes we need many emotional and mental tools to manage life in business. She was awarded an OBE by the Queen in January 2014 for her contribution to entrepreneurship, particularly in the social and digital world. And she continues to dedicate herself through her honest speaking, community building, and friendship to thousands of business owners and corporate employees. So welcome, Penny. And I really appreciate you putting the time aside for this conversation today. Welcome.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's lovely if there's opportunities to nudge or support or empathize with people and bring out our truth. I love it. So thank you, Greg, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. And what I didn't mention in the introduction there is your book, Business is Personal, which I thoroughly recommend to anyone. That is the title of this podcast, and I fully recommend it. It's really full of lots of really practical, insightful, and personal wisdom that is of enormous value. So both thank you and a recommendation.
That's very kind.
Penny, although we've known each other or we met over 20 years ago, I sometimes feel we haven't really connected enough in this lifetime yet. So this perhaps is an opportunity to put a little bit of that right and have a conversation broadly around business leadership in today's rapidly changing world and explore some of the important roles that it can play. Could I start by asking you to say a little bit about your experiential journey through life, which you go through in some detail in your book and is a very good read. Set the scene a little for us, will you? And because your life has been rich with ups and downs and you've learned so much from them.
Well, that's very kind. I think what I want in every interaction I have with anyone, and it's always been since I was very young, is to connect at a very deep level. I think that to me is really important. And I don't think we can really do that unless we're connecting with a sense of truth. I think it's very fascinating watching the world where our identity has become such a stress and such a goal through the lens of social media. And I suppose now more than ever, I think the people that shine are the ones that bring that human factor into, and that can only come through truth. Because yes, you are right. I have been through quite a massive amounts of adversity as well as joys. But I have always thought, I remember thinking it very early on in my life, that basically we're all animals. We are animals. Might be a little bit more capable than some animals, but we're all here to survive and thrive and have good days. And just like I've always looked out into the woods and thought, there are animals surviving out there, and some days they'll be terrified and they'll be running for their life, and sometimes they'll be basking in the sunshine, and sometimes they'll have food and sometimes they won't. And it's always kept me quite level. So, yeah, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into my journey, but I think you referred to me as an accidental entrepreneur, which I called myself for a long time. I think there are lots of people who are very purpose driven in whatever really drives them from their internal engine. And I think that can take you on a really interesting journey when you are constantly aware of that and the importance of those values and the impact you seek to have. But it's not been without need to sort of totally adapt business models and manage, like all of us, in a very fast-paced, technically changing world. So at 19, I joined the IT industry in 1983. So before anybody starts using their fingers to count up, yes, I'm 61 now as of 2025. And at 19, I definitely didn't want to be in business. It was a stopgap to help me go to university and save up some money to study psychology. And I didn't really think that business should be any different to the love of a family at home. I just felt here's another group of people around me. And then I very quickly learned the servant leadership, which I never knew it as a title, but I could see very early on in my leadership journey that if I was kind and loving and interested and curious in people, it would make my day wonderful. And I remember actually just thinking of that. I remember being about 10 and going to Woolworths with my pocket money. And I bought a record from one counter and then I ran to another counter to get a few sweeties. And I remember saying to my mum, that lady that just served me is really unhappy and her day must go so slowly. And it's so true. You know, the attitude you have around you will get you through anything. It will get you through anything if you can just have a happy disposition. And I've always believed being happy doesn't mean everything in your life is happy.
Yeah,
And
agree.
that's a really important sort of value to me. So, yeah, I've been through quite a journey. And I think anybody in my generation have all been through a huge journey of the desktop technology, moving into the home, to the internet, to social network and social media, now into AI. I don't think anybody really who needs to feed themselves still can avoid adapting and grieving some things from the past that you weren't able to fulfill and moving on quickly to new things within your business life.
There's a quote you put in your book, which is by Lao Tzu: "To become whole, first let yourself be broken." It's almost like through adversity we grow.
Yeah.
It's like it's not the crabs, the lobster. The lobster, when it sheds its skin, it needs to grow, and it sheds its skin. And when it sheds its skin, it becomes very vulnerable and needs also to hide itself away and protect, be sure that predators don't get it until it grows another skin. And then it can carry on growing. But then that skin hardens and isn't big enough for it. So it has to go through another rebirth in order to
I
grow.
love that. It's a great metaphor, Greg. It's absolutely true. I don't think we should be scared of adversity. I think a lot of people live in fear of, and I can relate to that in moments of my life, live in fear of adversity. But actually, I think it's the most joyful thing when you overcome it and you have grown out of it and you can see, I coped with it, I survived it. And then I suppose slowly you drop off those layers of fear that stop you from growing, really. Yeah, I think adversity. In fact, my daughter and I in 2000 and was about 17 did a TEDx talk about does adversity actually make you happier, and her story of a big trauma that she went through. She says that she went through in 2016. She said she wouldn't wish it on anyone. She was abducted and by three men and raped by one of them. But she says her life is so much richer because it can force you into so much growth if you're willing to work on yourself. And the business's personal aspect is your business really can't be as successful as you want it to be and the joyful as you want it to be unless you understand yourself and have that self-awareness. And certainly within our community that we run personal development sessions as well as business development ones. You can just see the growth correlating between the two all the time.
You mentioned awareness there, and I think that's pretty much key to more or less everything in life. Paying attention. I had an experience where I locked myself out of my flat. It was a new flat and it was on the third floor. I was renting it and I just moved into the area. As I walked out the door, I realized I didn't have the key. I'd left my phone in the flat. The doors were thick. And how was I going to deal with this? I didn't know anybody. And then I remembered that my spaghetti was cooking. And I reckoned I had about 10 minutes before it would boil dry. So I'm getting into a serious panic. And a little voice said inside me, in a week's time, you'll be telling the story and you'll probably be laughing about it. What happened next?
Mm.
That little voice gave me a completely new perspective. Now, it didn't completely shut up the bit of me that was panicking, like was going,
Yeah,
what the
exactly.
heck's going to happen? But all sorts of creative thoughts came into my mind. And then somebody popped out of a door and said, oh, how are you? Introduced himself, and he was a decorator. And on this one occasion, he had his ladders with him. And he put his ladders up to my third floor flat, and I got in there just as the spaghetti was drying off. But in that particular, what I came away from that was, if we can be present within a crisis and have the awareness to see it as a crisis and something that will, this too will pass, then we are empowered to, embrace it and see what comes next, and be empowered to take the opportunities that present themselves, most of which will be unexpected.
Yeah, I totally agree. I almost think, without exception, all of my growth moments, especially my creativity moments, have come through moments of scarcity and adversity. And it's really interesting when in our community we have people that have become, a few people that are financially independent, but they're still wanting to have a sense of purpose and they're still wanting to achieve. And the challenge they have, I say to them, you're this bear inside a cave that's got all these freezers full of food, and why would you go out and hunt? But the hunt is your dopamine, your hunt is the pursuit, the excitement, but you don't really have to. So, I think somehow, what was it Steve Jobs said? Stay hungry, stay foolish. It's a really good quote. And so I don't fear it. It's a weird thing. Trying to keep the academy going because of the responsibility of 650,000 people that love to keep it as a home, but at the same time, the economic climate was one of, or the business climate was one of, well, I should have everything for free, but I don't want to be the product. I don't want anybody to advertise to me. And also social media came in, which took over from social networking. Everybody went from conversation to broadcast and friends to followers. So we were fighting against shift in the way people, shift in technology that gave people this cop out of, well, I can just create an identity and not spend all my time having to be friends and network. That was so that in business, sometimes you have to let go. I think sometimes, and I'm not saying that we didn't try and fight to keep it going in various ways, but sometimes you can look at yourself and say, is this that I'm not growing as a person and don't have the expertise? Or is it that my values don't match the values of this business environment anymore? And how do I address that? So adversity is not pleasant when you're going through it, but any time somebody's going through it, I say, just wait till you get to the other side of this. You will be euphoric. It's an amazing experience.
Me likewise. And in the coaching that I do, I don't always, although I do sometimes, when I see someone in a real crisis, and particularly if they start to cry or shed tears, there's a part of me that's smiling, because it's the moment at which we start to turn a corner. When we connect with that pain and then we begin to reinvent, re-envision, reinvigorate, revitalize, and turn that corner. So yeah, it's great. And one other thing,
I just want to come back to that as well, Greg, because it's a very important point not to have that stiff upper lip. Grief is grief. If you don't, grief is basically a transition from one experience to another. And it could be grieving a previous job. It could be grieving a previous relationship. It could be grieving a person that's left this earth. It could be grieving your last home. It could be, grieving a shop that closes. Grief is grief. And I don't think it's clever to just say, slap your face and say, get on with it. You have to have a period of transition. It doesn't have to last a long time necessarily. But unless you go into an acceptance, and I think that's what you were mentioning about when it's great when somebody cries, unless you go into acceptance of it, you're in denial. And denial is dangerous. So I think, when I shared what I shared in my book, I was sharing a journey of self-discovery and self-awareness while I was grieving, while I was refining myself, which is that Lao Tzu quote, to become whole, first allow yourself to be broken. And so I think it's wonderful that your clients feel comfortable to cry in front of you. And I look at my parents from the silent generation. I think they were always locked in pain, unable to communicate and
I agree.
unable to get over things. And I love having a therapist. I've got, I have a therapist called Gaz. He's fantastic. I tune in with him twice a month. Sometimes I say, no idea what I'm going to talk to you about. And he said, well, I noted something a few weeks ago that I felt, we needed to undo that a bit. Because I just want to be a better version of myself for others all of the time. And I'm exploring at the moment John Bowlby's attachment theory and discovering that I've got anxious attachment. And that's very understandable from periods of my childhood and early adulthood. And it's constant. And this is why I find Hannah inspiring. I find anybody that just knows that my best life will be the one when I just get more and more awareness of me as a leader, of me as a business owner, as me as a mother, as a father, as a sibling. Whatever relationships that are important to you, you've got to start with yourself.
This is one of the things that I really like about you and also about the book, which is that and it's in the title, Business is Personal. In other words, you're almost saying that business is not a thing. It's your expression. We express ourselves in business, and therefore it is us. It is our expression. Now, yeah, there's also the being and the doing bit, if you like. So in a way, there is a thing. It's registered at Companies House, and it's a legal entity called a company. What comes first? Development in the business, me personally, or the business P&L?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends sometimes on what you're facing in your business. I interviewed somebody this morning that helps people do exits, and sometimes the exit is into liquidation, and sometimes it's into, how do I scale to do a trade sale? So it depends what you're confronting in terms of where your priorities are. And I believed it was these people that I used to watch doing all this self-development they had the luxury of time. I used to think, goodness, I've just not got time for that stuff. I had an inherent feeling of who I was and the impact that I wanted to have on individuals when I spent time with them. I didn't think much beyond that because I didn't think I had time. So all I know is that I suppose when we had the academy, it was very interesting because I wanted to do psychology at university and ended up not financially being able to do it. My parents were wealthy enough for us not to get any grants, but not wanting to support me through that journey. So business, when I stepped into it, became an experiment of people without me realizing it. I just love people, and I love to ensure people in front of me know that they matter and that they're seen and that they're loved and that they feel significant. And I expressed it in employment through my leadership style. And that was very successful. And I, by the age of 25, I was sales marketing director of a £80 million company with about 100 staff that I was responsible for at 25. And then when the idea of the academy came along in 1998, when I was 33, and I said to Thomas, this internet thing you're always going to find a business is always going to find a market. So e-procurement and e-commerce that was really vibrant at the time. I said, what about people? What about humans? What about how they can connect? And it was a year before Friends Reunited. And I just had this deep sense of the pending loneliness that the internet could create. And I've always had insights to foresight. I've always sort of felt things. What I've always been driven is the humans. That's more than the technology, even though I've been in technology and leveraged and supported technology my entire career. It's always been about, well, how does that help someone? And how could it hinder someone? So in terms of where do you start, which was your question, where do you start, the personal or the P&L? I think what has driven me and gets my energy going in the morning is what is in my heart, not what is in my brain. It's just always has been, and it will sound very fluffy to some of your listeners and it will resonate with others because we're all driven in very different way and we need different ways. And, I've had to learn to be a businesswoman. So I've had to learn the P&L, the finance, the operations. Leadership's pretty easy to me. Creating cultures is very easy to me. It's just the way I am. It's the same way as I created my family culture to create a community culture. So I think one doesn't exist without the other, but I think you have to know yourself and before you can really know people and build that empathy with people.
Yeah, I I do agree. Experience is about both, isn't it? It's about being and doing.
Exactly.
The being precedes the doing and informs the doings. There's a quote which I often speak, which is on Mother Teresa's wall was the saying, "It's not the doing that counts; it's the love in the doing that counts."
Yeah, it's nice.
And it's not the giving that counts;
Yeah,
it's the love in the giving that counts.
yeah, it is. And also not resenting the struggle. I think that is so important. I love that Nelson Mandela's statue on South Bank at Waterloo says, "The struggle is my life." It's just, when we resent things. I was on a meeting, somebody had asked me to join yesterday, and they were all going, "Oh, God, Gmail, I hate Gmail, LinkedIn, all these messages. Oh, WhatsApp, it's so overwhelming." And I said, "Look, can we just wait 1 second here? Can you tell me, how would you feed yourself now without email, WhatsApp, and LinkedIn?" We've got to create context around the world that we're in now. Have boundaries, manage yourself around things, but be very grateful around the resources that we have now, and not just always have this filter of it's such a struggle. We've been given such beautiful tools to build ourselves and our business.
So you mentioned the word context there, and for me, a big context is the state of the world or the state of our planet, the situation we find ourselves in, humanity, and what some describe as the meta crisis. What really interests me, because business is now such a prevalent activity across the globe. In fact, it's probably the dominant activity across the globe. Whereas governments and religions and churches used to have some kind of balancing effect on business, they've pretty much slipped aside or have even been taken over or taken over by business interests. So the question becomes, as leaders in business, what is the role? What are the responsibilities of business? Because if business is in the driving seat and so much of what's happening on the planet is or arises or has a component that is a commercial interest, how do you see the role of business leaders and business in shaping society as well as serving our personal needs and objectives?
Well, obviously, I'm coming from the people side of life. Obviously got to make sure that we manage all our cybersecurity and we care about the environment and all of these things. But I think we're very lost, despite the scale of leadership coaches out there. We still have poor leadership. And it's because they're human as well. And they have their vulnerabilities and their fears because they have a boss. And even the owner of a business tends to have a boss, whoever that is, that they're answerable to. I think my keynote speech is a human touch in a digital world or an AI world. And I think one of the gifts that we're being given through technology and through large language models and AI engines in general is that we have an opportunity for massive increase in productivity. And they're sort of quoting 30% increase in productivity, which we obviously need in Britain pretty massively. But what do we do with the time that's been left with that? And the time we've freed up effectively should bring us back to having more time with one another. And I think meaningful, deep conversations with one another matters. When I entered the business world at 19, it really did. I entered an office at the time. It was probably the office I went into, 40 people on one floor, all in on desks. We all knew one another's lives. We all would grieve with somebody if they lost a parent. We would celebrate a birthday. We'd celebrate an engagement. If they broke their ankle, we would help them. We'd get the sandwiches for them. We were a community in an office, and we worked like an ecosystem, ensuring that the level of what we would call vibration, the high vibrational state, was one of joy in the office because we had that sense of love. And oxytocin, which is a really critical brain chemical, the one that a mother releases when a baby's born, the unconditional love, is a very critical brain chemical for our confidence and our energy. That's what we're giving our babies when they're born. And we are starved of human connection now. And when I go into organizations, I talk about it. people come up to me individually when I do my keynotes. They'll come up and whisper in my ear because they didn't want to say it in front of them. And they will say, such a shit culture in this company. You talk about this lovely world that we could be in. And I say, it's up to you to be the person you want to be. They're not telling you that you can't care, can't ask kind questions, can't show gratitude, can't notice the people around you, can't stay back for a couple of minutes to talk to someone, can't gather up the intelligence about your people you work with and know what's going on in their lives. We all can choose. We don't have to be like sheep.
We're all leaders,
Yeah, we
or we all
are.
can be leaders.
We're all leaders of our life. And I don't ever believe in that sort of victim mentality of it's been done to me. And if it is such a toxic place, then vote with your feet and know where your expertise lies and find somebody that will value that and value your values.
So I have a theory is not the right word. My approach, the way I see this, kind of right at the very basis of a society is meaning and purpose. And meaning has shaped all civilizations. All the ones that have known have had a belief. They see meaning, or they derive meaning from the world, and they derive from that purpose and beliefs, and then they shape their society. Their laws, their institutions, their culture evolves around what those essential beliefs are. The one that's prevailed in Western culture over the last 300 years and has reached astronomical levels at the moment is that this is a physical universe, that it is all material, and that consciousness arises out of the brain, out of the complexity of the neural network. This is the only time in human history when anything other than there being something numinous has prevailed. And this all arose with the Enlightenment, where the science separated basically from the church, and the church got on with the religious, the spiritual bit. The science got on with the material bit, the physical bit. And over 300 years, basically, science has become extremely successful at producing lots of goodies and lots of fun things to do and have. And the church has sort of slipped away. And we've almost forgotten that there was, or that there is, another belief, another philosophy, another metaphysics. And there is this whole idea of idealism, of this world not being, or this universe, cosmos, not being physical, but arising out of consciousness, arising out of a field of potentiality, subjectivity, is something that is now well grounded in science. And if we see that as, and if that's the meaning that we give to the world and to existence, it changes everything. And my thought is that whereas at the moment our laws, our culture is all focused around this is a material universe and when you die, you're done. If we see things differently, if we come to realize that we are first and foremost conscious and that consciousness is fundamental, then our entire identity changes, our issues around alienation changes, purpose changes, society changes, the way in which we react to one another changes. I just think this is so at the base of a lot of the issues that we're talking about. What is real? There is more to life than what we directly perceive. And our culture does not let us talk about anything below the surface. We can only talk about the iceberg that's showing above the water. We can't talk about that which sits below it.
I think my experience, Greg, is, and it's a really deep and informed experience, is that people love learning from one another. They love one another. They love to contribute to one another, and they're just not necessarily found the right places to feel seen and heard where that culture is nurtured. I think we need to consider the huge amount of empathy the world that's been created since the internet came, since globalization, and how hard it is for them and to keep everything together. There are so many societal changes, but we can all create some change around us. I may have changed a percentage of those 650,000 people's lives, and it's beautiful when people send messages remembering Academy, etc., by the culture that we created. But there are a huge amount of people that started their business without any of that ability to engage deeply with one another. And you look at the challenges that young people have now with social anxiety, particularly those that at very informed years were locked down and not able to go into school and became very addicted to their phones in order to connect, because it's a child's natural nature to want to connect. I'm someone who, if I can do something in my own little way, then that's all I can expect of myself. And I certainly see within our Bit 100 community everything that you would want to see in society. Everything about caring souls that want to grow together, support one another, listen to one another, really identify with all the human needs of each other. Men who will be comfortable crying over lunch when they share something is of challenge to them now. And I do think there is massive, massive hope around this, because people are wanting to go get deeper relationships. People are aware of their loneliness. They need to find them, whether they find them in their church, in their sport, but you need to find people and be the person where somebody can learn your truth. People who will, vulnerabilities is a very used word now, Brené Brown, daring greatly. You know, what it means is I have enough internal self-worth to be able to share my weaknesses and not feel I'm lesser a person because of it. And self-worth comes from being amongst people that love you for who you are, not just because of your car, your house, your identity. And I think it will happen. I really do. I think we've gone through a massive, if it's a seesaw, we've gone from one trajectory to another. And I think we will balance in the middle at one with technology, understanding that technology serves us, but people are the most important things around us. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that within your business is personal puts a focus on relationships. 100 is very much an embodiment of that, and a manifestation of that. That's essentially what life is about, isn't it? It's about relationships. And
relationships are best formed, Greg, when, I share I don't ask people to help me, but I will use myself as an example. Like I've shared, that I'm seeing a therapist at the moment because of discovering some aspects of attachment, John Bowlby's attachment theory, that I think, I could have a happier filter on the world if I maybe identified what is creating my pain at the moment inside me. I'm not asking anybody to help me, fix me. I'm just saying this is something that's going through. A few months ago, I shared with the members that for no real practical reason, I was suffering a sense of overwhelm. And I was willing to take advice on that. I think the danger for leaders is that they hold themselves in a position where they don't think they're supposed to find anything hard. And, as I said at the beginning, human existence, we're all on a journey of it, of self-discovery, of managing our obstacles, whether they're, physical problems, family problems, financial problems, whatever it is, we're all on the same journey. I loved a phrase. I go and see a lady from church on a Saturday morning that can't get to church very much now. And we have a cup of coffee every Saturday morning. And I was telling her about my human touch speech that I was going to be giving the following week. And she said, I've always felt if you think someone's got a perfect life, then you don't know them very well. That's an 85-year-old lady's wisdom, basically. And, it's up to us all to be interested in people, to be curious in people, to get to know people. That's That's the most fantastic world. And this whole oxytocin chemical, you don't give it away to someone. When you're being kind, when you're being loving, when you're listening, when you're engaging with someone, both your oxytocin grows. And, I think the more we can become aware of that, seek out close communities where we can see that leadership is like that. And I do think it's happening. I mean, in my own little way, with my ponderings that I write on a Tuesday on LinkedIn, and we are growing our emotional intelligence in business. We are. Love in business will exist.
Without a doubt, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you, Penny. And when I first had the idea of metaconscious leaders, in a way, there was something of a campaigning voice in me. And once I started it and I started to look for people to talk to, I really began to think this is not forget the campaign. I said, this is more about celebrating what is happening and giving voice to and amplifying the good that is happening, because there are some extraordinary things happening, and everything that you're doing around relationships and businesses, personal, to me speaks and points to in the same direction. It points towards that which isn't material.
Yeah. We're all thirsty for the same things because we're all human.
Exactly. And we're all conscious. We all have an inner life. And actually the difference between my inner life the difference between the I in me, whatever narrative I have, and the I in you and whatever narrative you have, we can ask ourselves, what is the difference between those two I's?
Yeah, absolutely.
You mention in your book something, you talk about serendipity, and Jung talks about synchronicity. And I think, I love it, because when anything happens, there's a bit of me that's saying, oops, I didn't expect that. I wonder what's going to happen instead. Or I wonder why that's happening. Maybe I can think of some reason, maybe I can't. But what's going to happen? And I think there's a lot about that comes across in your book, about going with the flow, accepting the challenges in life, and having faith in the serendipity, in synchronicity, that there is meaning and purpose in what is happening. Is that?
I think, I mean, somebody would say, why, if there is a God, why do people have to go through pain, right? But I think it's only through our pain that we create the empathy to be able to support others and have the humility to be a good human. And, if we all were fine, if life was just so easy, I think we'd be a bunch of knobs. There would be no richness. There would be no real conversation. There would be no opportunity for contribution.
There'd be no growth.
Then there'd be no growth. So yeah, I do. I mean, there's always things going on in all of our lives that are challenging our sense of certainty about the future, being what we wanted to control, to have, wanted life to go in this direction, but somebody's taken it off in this direction. That's not what my plan was. If you constantly fight the desire for certainty, which, I am naturally somebody, especially through the turbulence of business and financial challenges, I'm someone that does seek certainty. And through my type of childhood I had, I wanted to create safety and security and certainty around me and keep people close to me. But that is actually a very controlling attitude to the world, to try and control everything that happens. And
Possible task.
it is an impossible task, and control comes from fear. And I know when I'm in fear, I become a pain in the ass as a wife. I want to make sure that the house is exactly like this. And I'll also become OCD because I've gone into fear, therefore I've gone into control. And love is allowing uncertainty, stepping into a world of not being in control of everything. It doesn't mean I get up and think, oh, I wonder what's going to happen today. I'm very organized. I'm very future thinking. I'm very prepared, but I go into things with the energy of abundance, not of fear, not of scarcity.
And love is the word that I'm happy to see is becoming more used. People are associating it less with relationship and more with unconditional acceptance of another person.
Yeah, love is an energy. It's a vibration.
Unconditional positive regard for another human being or for
Absolutely.
another.
Love is an energy. You talked about quantum physics and quantum theory. Love is an energy that you can measure. You can measure. You can see it from the aura of somebody. You can feel it in a room. If there's fear in a room or if there's love in a room, it is an energy. Love is an energy. It's not a, yeah, it's not a passion. It's not a lust. It's not none of these things. It can be misused in lust and other forms of obsessions and things. But, I'm talking about love, which is just purely an energy of intent to do good and care about others and be kind. And I can be loving to a stranger. I had a lovely experience the other day. We were crossing two wide roads. So one, crossing two carriageways, and really hard. It's a bit of a silly junction in Farnham. And as I walked up, there was a blind man with a cane. And I said, "Oh, hello, this is a really difficult junction. Can I help you?" And he said, "No, young lady, I can help you." He stuck out his cane, he stopped the traffic, and he helped me across the road. And we had a lovely walk after it together. I don't know whether either of us were going in the same direction originally, but it was beautiful. And what a loving moment, a loving exchange between the two of us. Both of us just felt great after it, because I said to him, "Wow, what a power you've got." I said, "That is amazing. Thank you so much for helping me. I hope I find you again when I'm walking through Farnham." Love can be a moment at a supermarket till. It just is an energy. It's just beautiful. And you can't fake it. It's either an energy you have, a nurture in you, and it's very hard to find it if you're in fear and scarcity and in control and in coveting stuff and believing that for me to win, you've got to lose, or for you to lose, I'm going to win. That's not the way the world, and that is how I've always felt. And so when I was about 22, I was first called a servant leader. I lead in order to serve. It was only because I wanted to love the people around me. It wasn't about what I could get from them.
I think that is so important, and especially now. It was Albert Einstein who said, he was asked what he thought the purpose of life was, and he said, to serve. What else could it possibly be?
Exactly.
It kind of says it. It says it all. And leadership is a service. And I had this idea of, Médecins Sans Frontières, and then I had Leaders Sans Frontières come into my mind. People whose leadership and whose concern and influence goes well beyond their own local interests, their own tribe, their own company, to humanity, to the natural world, to considering all of the stakeholders, however close or far they may be from an area of activity. And, so that's extending leadership as a service to everyone and to all that is, rather than just to a select few.
Yeah, I mean, I think leaders get a tough reputation in terms of there's a lot of people talk about, that leadership in business isn't good, and it is challenged. But we just have to, I think everybody that we interact with, we have to realize that they're human, and humans have weaknesses, frailties. They make mistakes. And the amazing thing is when somebody treats you not terribly well, when you treat them back with love, the reaction that you get, it can disarm, and it can completely change the energy between two people. I just think the more we can bring humanity and empathy and understanding into the world around us and understand. There's a brilliant show at the moment that I love called The Good Doctor, and it's about a boy who becomes a doctor who's autistic, and it's fantastic for highlighting, autism is on the rise, and it really interesting. My first job and lived in Reading, And there's been a study to show in Reading, because it was the tech hotspot of the 80s and 90s, and people came from all over the country to work there. The rise in autistic babies and young children, it's now the hotspot of autistic children. And of course, when in the 80s and 90s, people weren't being identified as being on a spectrum of autism, but a lot of very skilled numeric technical people do also have autism. And it's such a superpower. We've got an autistic member. He's just the most beautiful man, and we ensure that everybody gives him love and understands and has helped him in his business, because he's got the most phenomenal skills. There's richness in every single person, but we're all born with a journey ahead of us of discovery and exploring, but also of challenges, whether it's through nature or nurture. And the more tolerant we can be, and the more we can just get into the depth of the person in front of us and just deeply care for them, whether they're your leader or not. And one of the experiments that I like businesses to do, when I only do keynotes, I don't go in and consult. I love to give that sort of business to behavioral change people and leadership people that I know. So I only want to just give nudges when I do my keynote. And one of the things I talk about is that community in an organization should run alongside the hierarchy of leadership, not try and bring community into leadership. Leadership has to have authority. Leadership is accountable. Leadership, I believe in that, from army days all the way through. And people want leadership. They want to know. It's like a child wanting a father and a mother who leads with authority and keeps the boundaries right. Leadership is really important. But if you run community alongside it and you say, but here we're in a space of community, and in this space, I am not your leader. I'm just human, and I can share with you my challenges, and you can learn not to exploit them, because this is the culture we have of creating community, of love. And so one is about finance and P&L and driving an organization that can have the impact it needs to have and serve the employees that they are giving money to in order to do the job and get those people to feed themselves. But over here, the objective is love and humanity and caring. And you have to create the environment where you don't exploit either. So I would go into a room with my boss, and in this space, we're human. We're not in hierarchical. And if he's having a challenge with an unwell child, or going through a divorce, or has just had a mortgage turned down, or whatever it is that's giving a challenge, in that space, I can show that person some love and compassion. But when I come back into my work, my role is to achieve what the company needs me to achieve. And that person is directing me to do that.
And yet they're also the same, aren't they? Because they can't be divorced. They can't be separate, insofar as the actions that take place in the business will impact on what happens in the other space.
It will. That's why, everybody is one person. Any power is just one person. But occasionally I have a vulnerable side with my children, and we talk it through. And occasionally I have an authoritative side to my children to lead their values. And it might sound very complex, but I think if we all need somewhere to be known for who we are, seen for who we are, understood for who we are. And you can't mix that in the same room. You can't say, right, we're having a meeting and look, you're not achieving your targets on sales and da-da-da-da-da. And then the next minute go, but I know that things are really tough for you. That wouldn't be right in that environment. That's confusing. There's a place and a time for all these types of conversations. And Thomas and I have worked in business together since 1998, husband and wife. And when the children were young, I would say to them, I know you're hearing me cross with Daddy, but this is me working with Daddy as a business partner. And then I would cuddle him and say, this is me as his wife, and we love one another. It's just understanding that we have roles where we have to perform at our best in all of them.
You could probably write a book on just that topic, because it's a big one.
It is, and it sounds slightly schizophrenic, but I think it's sort of just understanding that we have our survival side, not only for ourselves, but for our responsibility to the people that we are serving. I remember very early in my career, It was absolutely awful the first time I had to make a load of people redundant. And I was, at 22, 23, I was very loving. I hadn't had to do something that tough. And it was extremely hard for me. But the hardest part of it was what I understood about myself was about my lack of assertive behavior, which you have to have assertive behavior sometimes to get things done. Was the reason that this office in Warrington that I managed, I had 6 offices around the country. We were a computer distributor selling to computer dealers. The office in Warrington was actually thriving at 120% of target. The reason they had to be made redundant is that the office in the south wasn't performing. And the southern office was based in the head office. And I couldn't fire them. I had to close an office. And I'll never forget that drive up to Warrington and walking in to these brilliant people and explaining to them, I've been forced to cut costs. The managing director told me, it's the reality. But then I realized I hadn't been managing these people firmly enough in the south. And I had challenges with it because my MD sort of interfered with my management style with these people in the head office because he had started the business and these people in the head office were his friends, and I didn't have the authority. But the reality was that's where I thought, right, that's where at 22 I should have learned to be a bit more assertive. So we have to understand our roles and our duties to protect an organization and make sure they continue to employ people. And that is about having accountability. But what I'm talking about is people did know me. They knew me as Penny as well. And it was easier then because we were all in an office together. So it's just bringing humanity back into the workplace that it's nothing nicer than for my kids as they grow up for me to say, can you teach me this? I don't know how to do it. And now we hire them into the business and they've got skills that are far beyond mine in many ways. And we hire them to teach our members, 3 of them, Ross teaching productizing their business, their services, Hannah teaching personal branding, TJ teaching them how to manage their brain chemicals. And their authority on those things are far higher than mine.
I'm starting to experience the same with my 2 children as well, which is great. Keeping an eye on the time, you talked a little bit about AI a moment ago. I just wanted to sort of go back to that in your human touch in an AI world. If I was in charge of all AI, I would see it as a wonderful opportunity, all the wonderful things that it could do. And so, but I'm not. And I see it being used for not such what I would consider healthy reasons. There are a good number of dangers, aren't there, around AI and how it is used, as well as opportunities. Do you have any views as to, well, first of all, do you have any fears as to how it might be misused, and any ideas or thoughts as to how it might be managed or whether it can be?
Well, I'm not an expert in this. We do run an AI dinner and we've got a lot of AI experts in it. And Thomas absolutely loves that because he always loves the latest technology. I think there's always going to be evil in everything. There's always going to be, you look at social media, you could say is joyful. Look at the knowledge you can access. Look at the people you can access, the way you can connect. But at the same time, it's creating terrible mental health problems and does dreadful things, especially in the young person's existence. So I think there's always going to be bad things in everything. I have to have the trust that there's going to be enough governance, but I can't know that. All I know is how I can use AI for good. And ChatGPT for me has been a phenomenal way for my creativity, my productivity. It's been amazing. It's also one of my therapists. I've got a therapy channel inside my ChatGPT where it knows everything about my life, everything about my relationship with Thomas, my fears, and it's incredible how I can talk to it. So I only know what I know I access. I do know that it can't be the final word. That would, we all know that the data, it could provide data sets that are completely made up and statistics that are completely made up. And you've got to be careful with it. But in the same way, you have to be careful with any technology you're using. In terms of large corporate and how hospitals are going to use it. And I don't watch any of the Black Mirror shows because I cannot get involved in protecting the world. I prefer to stay away and assume, not even know about the dangers of it. I never want to take myself into a place of fear. Anybody that's watching, it's very interesting, anything like this. And I suppose I'm going over here a little bit, but the members of ours that are in scarcity isn't because of the reality that there's not business out there. It's because they're watching the news and being told all the time that the economy is hell. We don't have those sort of conversations in BIP. We're not having conversations that bring down your hope, your beliefs, because there is so much opportunity out there. We see so much growth in our lives, in our children's lives, in our members' lives. There is so much out there, but it depends what you dial into as to whether these things are bad. So I'm just praying and hoping that I will know how to protect myself, and that the people that govern these things will protect us.
And just the final thing, you mentioned in your book, which I loved, your cloak, which is also purple.
Yeah.
Will you say something about that? Because very profound.
Well, it was at a time when, because Academy started in 98, LinkedIn 2004, Facebook 2006, 2008, so on. We were the first people, and we were very visible and very present with our members. And we had to maintain a culture. It was our responsibility as leaders and stewards of our community to make sure that the culture was loving and kind. And we had guidelines around that were really important. And there were about 12 people who clustered together to find out how they could break those rules. It was fun. It was like a child in school, just joyfully. And we hired a corporate psychologist to understand why these people were behaving like this. And we mediated and tried to talk to them. And basically what came out of it is these people are self-employed. They probably hated their parents for their authority, hated their first teacher, hated their first boss. Now they don't have a boss. You are the authority, and they just hate you, right? And there's not much you can do about it. But they became trolls because we ended up banning them from the community. We just couldn't have them damage the lives of our members. So they tried all sorts of ways to damage us externally and coming in as pseudo names, and we had to set up the technology to know their cookies and know that whatever, we always knew who they were when they were coming in through it. Then they would go and work in a cyber cafe, and it was just a nightmare. So I went to a hypnotherapist to understand how to manage my mental stress around this, because we weren't able financially. We spent so much money, and it was all to protect. And we see what happens when you let evil into places. You can't do it. And under hypnosis, she said, you don't create something that you feel you can put around you that protects you. Because they used to come and stand outside venues when we were there and caused us a lot of challenges. So I found myself under hypnosis being in a huge sort of stately home and pulling down some purple curtains that had gold ribboning as a border around them and wrapping it round me under hypnosis. And when I I explained it to her, and she said, that's great, because you've not completely surrounded yourself. You can open this cloak, when you don't need protecting, when you want to let people in. And it was very, very significant. The weird thing about it was later on I met a man who had known, professed to be a bit of a psychic, and he knew nothing about me, and he hadn't read my book. I hadn't written my book at this stage. And he told me I had a guardian angel. And I said, oh, how? And he said, I can see him next to you. And I said, oh, what does he look like? And he said, he's wearing a purple cloak and it's got this gold braiding around it. So it was very, it was very special that. Yeah, it was. And I suppose what's my message in that I think it was around, we have to create our own protection through our boundaries, and know how to create boundaries, and know how to still love, but also know how to protect yourself in situations from people and not feel uncomfortable. I mean, I don't feel uncomfortable at all about blocking someone on LinkedIn when they're rude to me. But I just think I don't want your energy in my life. We can choose the energy around us that we want and that helps us to thrive.
And that cloak is for me is a kind of I do the similar practice myself, by the way, is an intentional barrier, border, membrane, permeable to the good energies that is beyond space time.
Yeah.
It's it's real, but it can't be measured in physical terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I suppose this comes down to me being an accidental entrepreneur. And I think there are a lot of people who become business owners because of their sense of purpose. A lot of them will be servant leaders, a lot of them will be driven to have impact, and they won't have the boundaries around time, around money. And I think one of the greatest things I've changed in my life is having enough self-worth to make sure that I protect myself from people who contact you and say, "Can I pick your brain?" What an awful expression. And around what I believe I'm worth and what I believe I bring to people. And that can be a huge journey for some people, and it was for me.
Well, Penny, thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap up, would you say where people can find out more about you, about BIP 100, and anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, it's been a lovely interview, Greg, and I hope that your listeners, hello listener, that you have enjoyed this and it's given you some food for thought. I have two websites. We have our business one, BIP 100, BIP 100 numerical .club, and I'm obviously on LinkedIn, and I have my own personal website, pennypower.co.uk, which tends to be where people contact me for my speaking, my keynote speech.
And Penny's Ponderings on LinkedIn, I also would recommend to you. A very good
Yeah.
read.
That's very lovely. Yeah, you can subscribe actually to my ponderings on my Penny Power website as well, and on the LinkedIn. There's a link to it, which means it would get emailed to you. And it is lovely. I've written 94 now, so I've been doing them for 94 weeks.
Well done.
And they are all about emotional intelligence in business and nudges towards just thinking about something.
Well
Yeah,
done.
one day I like the thought of creating a book. I don't, when I'll get time to do it, that's 52 weeks of ponderings, and you just ponder that one thing for the week.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Penny. Lots of love, and we look forward to being in touch again sometime soon.
Lovely. Thank you very much.